Welcome back, Random Digits here. Today I'm going to show you how to set up your own server from scratch, hopefully cheaper than Mojang's server thing. So I'm looking at some more expensive plans right now. These are in the range of $40, $50, but they're easily big enough to host a large server. If you're looking for something small for you and maybe 3 or 4 friends, this is very cheap, $6 a month. You get 2 gigabytes of RAM, so that gives you about 1 for Minecraft. Now, what I'm currently running my server on, which usually has about 10 people on it, at PHPcraft.ca, if you don't already know, is the VPS Classic 8 gigabytes from OVH, as you can see here. It costs me about $22 a month. If you're not using more than 6 players or so and you're not hosting a website, then the 4 gigabyte one should be easily enough. So we've set it up. This tutorial uses Debian 7, as you can see here, 64 bits of course, in case you ever decide to upgrade past 4 gigabytes of RAM. So once you sign up, they'll send you an email with the IP address of the server, your username and password. Username should just be root. The password will be your password. So what you want to do is you want to open up Terminal, or if you're on Windows, you want to use an application called Putty. There's a bunch of tutorials online for how to start up an SSH connection in Putty. If using Mac OS X, just paste this in, SSH, then root your username at the IP address, and then you put in your password here. Windows will be similar to that. The first time they'll probably ask you to accept an RSA certificate. Just write yes to that if you are sure it's the actual thing. So sudo su, that gets you into super user. By default here, since you logged in as root, you are a super user. So first thing you're going to run is apt-get space update. That's just going to update all the sources for the package manager. Say yes to update anything. Alright, so the command we just ran installs the latest Java version, or at least Java 1.7 in this case. Not actually the latest. If Java 1.8 is mainstream and everything on Linux, by the time you're doing this, you may want to install that instead. So use java-version. You'll see that currently it's set at Java 1.6. We need to change that. So update-alternatives --config Java allows us to see what Java is currently being used. Type in the number for the selection. In this case, we want Java 7. You can see using the version thing, it is using Java 7. So we're going to install MySQL server and the MySQL client now. apt-get install. You can see the command. I will put a list of all the commands in the description, of course. So now we want to set the MySQL root user's password. This is the absolute root for configuring all the databases and such admin tasks. So you're going to want to choose something very secure for this, uppercase, lowercase letters, all the things you've been told all your life about password. Alright, perfect. That's installing now. That's all we need. So after we're done that, we're going to have to restart Apache, except we haven't installed Apache yet. That's a small mistake. Alright, so just apt-get space install space Apache 2. So that's installing. Say yes, allow it to install. Alright, perfect. Now we're going to install PHP 5 and some other stuff. So here, it doesn't really matter. I just put no because the next package I install fixes this. So we're going to install a PHP 5 after this. It plugs into Apache and allows you to execute PHP in your website. Multicraft web panel does use PHP, so this is a necessary step. There we are. Install that, say yes, and we're good. We have Apache now. You're going to restart Apache, of course, and you should now be able to visit the IP address of your server in your web browser and see a website, just a default one, of course. I'm not going to go over how to change the default website in this tutorial. I will be installing PHPmyadmin and Multicraft, of course. Alright, so now we're going to install the MySQL plugin for PHP to allow it to access the MySQL server. Alright, there we are. That's done. Reloaded Apache now. Now we're going to install PHPmyadmin or PHP5 SQLite. This contains a certain package I was having trouble getting things to work without. Alright, clear that up. Now restart Apache, of course, and we install PHPmyadmin. Alright, so we're using an Apache 2 server, so select Apache 2. Just select yes to this. Alright, so now we need the password it's going to use to set up the SQL databases. So this is the root password you chose earlier. I very much hope you wrote that down. It's probably a good idea to create a file where you store all these passwords. Preferably you would write them out on a piece of paper so they can't be stolen electronically, but whatever works for you. Alright. So that's the password you're going to need to use. Alright, here we are. So this is the Apache configuration file. What we need to do is we need to tell Apache that it's supposed to be serving PHPmyadmin's web pages as well. Multicraft sets this up automatically, but for PHPmyadmin, we need to add a line. Restart your Apache, of course. Now we're going to go back to your IP address /PHPmyadmin and log in with the root account for your SQL server. And then the password you chose earlier, or one of them. Save the password if you want, it doesn't really matter. Alright, so now that we've verified we can log in, we're going to need to modify some of the PHPmyadmin files. So what we're going to do now is we're going to make it so that later when you have Multicraft set up in the FTP server and everything, and when you're uploading a database to PHPmyadmin, you can upload much larger files. So instead of having 2 MB max upload size, we're going to change that to 16 GB in case you have any massive databases. Alright, so we'll finish up doing that. There's multiple things we need to change, and since you can't upload a 16 GB file in 60 seconds, we'll give you a bit of extra time here. Unless you can. I'd be impressed. Alright, so the memory limit, I'm increasing that to 512 megabytes. I deal with very large databases. If you're running a small server and you're not using PHP for anything on the server, 128 megabytes is probably okay. We also want to change the max execution time for PHP scripts to a much larger time in case you're uploading a very large database that takes a long time to execute all the queries in. Restart to apply the changes. Alright, we're going to download Multicraft now. So it's downloading now. It is compressed, so once it's done downloading, you use the command tar space and then the name of the file you want to uncompress. Now we can see all the files you've uncompressed. You can see the directory containing both the compressed file and Multicraft, the folder. Multicraft, the folder, is what we've just uncompressed, so you're going to use cd Multicraft to open it. ls is list if you haven't picked that up. Alright, so // is to run it, so we're now running the Multicraft installer. Alright, so we were saying, if you don't put anything, the thing that's in hard brackets is used by default. So yes, we wanted to create users. Yes, the Multicraft is running under the user Minecraft. Create the user. Yes. Install Multicraft under this directory. That's fine. If you have a license key, I'm not currently in possession of a license key. I hope to obtain one soon. The daemon for this, daemon1, we are running the front end on this. User of the web server, fine. All this is good by default. Here we have uploading jars. So I enabled this because I'm the only one using Multicraft, but if you're setting it up to run multiple servers, it may not be a good idea to allow other people to upload jars, because there are some, Java has pretty large amounts of permissions here, and a malicious jar could mess stuff up. Alright, so the type of database we want to use, we're going to be using a MySQL server. And the data, we're going to set up these databases as we go using PHPmyadmin, which we installed earlier. Sadly, multicraft_daemon, like that, is too long to actually use. So as you'll see in a second, we need to make that a bit shorter. So we'll cut the last 3 letters off. All right, so you're going to go to privileges, add new user. Here's the username you had from earlier. You're going to want to choose another secure password here. PHPmyadmin can actually generate the passwords for you, and that's what I've done. I'm going to have to hide those from you, though. It's the one thing you can't copy from this tutorial. As you can see, the last letter is cut off. So just to make it, I don't know, more coherent, I cut off the last 2 letters as well. So you want to, localhost means only the local machine can connect to it, which gives it added security, as connections from the rest of the internet should be automatically denied. And we're going to create a database with the same username and grant all privileges. So what this is going to do is we're creating a user that can only edit its own database. So even if that user were to be compromised, it couldn't mess up that much stuff and couldn't modify things in a larger scope. It adds to the combined security. All right. So there we are. We're not using the default username, so you put that in. Database user is also the username we just defined. There's the password. I just pasted it. I remembered to write down all of these passwords. All right, so just run through those things. Defaults work for most places. Let it install. All right, read these instructions very carefully. All right, we want to open Apache, and we want to enable security. So basically, this is going to allow Multicraft's Apache server config file thing to override people being allowed to access this directory. All right, and we'll do it for the SQL version as well, in case you are using SQL for your website. So this is going to prohibit people from visiting the files that contain stuff that if they could get at them, bad things would happen. All right, so system security was void there. Sorry, that's from before. So you missed the previous step. The previous step was just to press OK. So all the requirements are met. We've set everything up. Continue. Yep, it successfully moved the configuration file. Keep going. So we're going to set up the MySQL server here. So we're going to need to create a database again. Luckily, panel is short enough this time. So there is no such table, and the database seems uninitialized. So we're going to take this, copy it. So now we're going to create another user as we did before. Just go back to home. Log in again if it's been too long. So you want to go to privileges. Nope, privileges. Add a new user. This is going to be your username. Paste this. Host, localhost again works. No password for this. Or, sorry, use text field, not no password. That would be terrible. All right, now change your database to create a database with the same username and grant all privileges. Create the user and by extension the database. Perfect. All right, now you're going to paste the username in again. First the password, of course. I'm going to hide that from you again. Paste that. And click Save and Test. Oh, okay. All right, so if you reload this page, it'll show you a list of all the databases on the left. That hasn't been updated yet, though. So there we are. You can see the underscore panel. Alright, so you can see we're going to save it and test it. Perfect. Initialize the database now. Alright, now if we go back to PHPmyadmin and refresh, you can see that it's actually populated this database with a bunch of tables filled with data. Perfect. We have successfully established a connection, so now we need to log in with the password and username, which are stored in the database. The default is admin and admin. Alright, so to the next step. Here we have to set up the database for the daemon. This is a background process that runs on the server and starts and stops your Minecraft servers, as well as makes sure they have not crashed, and takes action when they do. Alright, so we're going to initialize the database. Perfect. Continue. Alright, here we are. So you should see the daemon database is now also populated. Alright, administer contract email. I've put my server's email in here. The API, you may be using this. If so, enable it. I am not. You can hide the user list from normal users. Don't disable the FTP client unless you don't plan on using it. Here you want to set a password for the daemon connections. This is just in case you want to expand to multiple servers later, all managed from one configuration thing. Multicraft can be expanded with one web panel administering multiple servers. Alright, so now we're going to make sure in the Multicraft config we have these things. So we're going to make sure our password for the daemon is in there, database password, and then we're going to start the server using the command provided. Alright, so just enter go to the root, and now we're going to go into the users directory. Minecraft is the username Multicraft runs under. Open the Multicraft folder and edit the Multicraft config file using nano. There are multiple text editors available for Linux. There are wars about it. I use nano for no good reason. Alright, so we're going to change the password to the password you chose before in the previous step. Give me a second to copy paste it here. Alright, perfect. Now you want to uncomment it. So things that are commented aren't processed, and we want our password to be processed. Alright, so you want to make sure all of these things line up. They seem to. So now you're just going to use Control X and save the file. Any second now. There we are. Yes, and perfect. The name stays the same. Now you're going to copy paste the command into the terminal or command line and run it. This starts the daemon. You can see it is now detected. You may need to click refresh. So you can actually run multiple of these across multiple servers, like I've said. Continue to Multicraft, and now we want to delete the installer file so people can't start installing Multicraft again over top of your installation with their own settings. They may not succeed at taking control of anything, but they will seriously mess up your configurations. So just rm to delete, and you can see that now the install PHP file is gone. So if you take the IP address and you open it up in a new tab, you should be able to put install/install.php at the end, and nothing should happen. Perfect. Go back to Multicraft Home. Sorry, I skipped the getting to this. What we're doing is we're downloading a jar for the server to run off of. You're going to need to click Settings at the top, then Update Minecraft on the left. We're adding a custom jar file from downloads from a file URL. So this is the default configuration for Spigot. You're going to need to put a link to the server file here. That may be difficult to obtain in these days. Hopefully Spigot gets on top of their legal issues and manages to fend them off and provide jar downloads. Alright, so you're going to add that. Now you're going to edit the configuration file as soon as it's done downloading. So the problem is it'll download the configuration file, which overwrites the settings you just had for where to get the file from. So after this is done, we're just going to navigate to that file in console and modify it to point to our download server. Or possibly the public one is back up by then. If this works, then just never mind the next step. So you're going to go back into your Minecraft directory, back into the Multicraft directory, and edit the config file for the spaghetti jar in the jar directory. So here's the source. You want to modify that to your own source. And just put that right there. Now you want to save this file and tab back to Multicraft and download the jar file, not the configuration file. That'll overwrite the settings you just set. Perfect, you should see a server here. I'm going to create a new one to show you. So let's just set this up as first server, players, whatever, IP address. You can leave most of these things default. Amount of memory to assign it. If you have 4 gigabytes, you should probably be safe assigning it 2.5 and leaving a gig and a half for Linux. You may be able to play around with this. Alright, so now it's starting the server. You'll notice that it stops with an error about agreeing to the EULA. If you're new to this or haven't configured a server in a while, Minecraft added a EULA you need to agree to start your server. Just edit the file and set EULA equals true. Start the server again. In console, you should see it actually starts up and begins to generate this world. You've set up your server, you've configured it, and now all you need to do is connect to it with your client.